After family reunion, I found my safe empty. Dad smiled. We voted. You're not living here for free. We used it for your brother's college. I said, then you won't mind what happens next, and walked out. The next day, they wouldn't stop calling. Inside for, hey everyone. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. After family reunion, I found my safe empty. Dad smiled. We voted. You're not living here for free. We used it for your brother's college. I said, then you won't mind what happens next, and walked out. The next day, they wouldn't stop calling. Inside for, sup, Reddit. So I need to start from the beginning for this to make any sense. My 27 male whole life, I've basically been the other son in my family. My younger brother Billy, 24, has always been the golden child. Like everything I did was measured against him, and somehow I always came up short. My parents, Frank, 63 male, and Diane, 59 female, didn't even try to hide how obvious their favoritism was. Dad works as an accountant at some mid-level firm, and mom's in real estate. They had this perfect little vision of how our lives should go, and I never quite fit the mold. They wanted us both to go into finance or law or medicine, something respectable with a fancy degree they could brag about at their country club. I still remember this one time in high school when I won a regional competition for this engine rebuild project. Spent months in an auto shop working on it, even gave up going to winter formal to finish in time. When I brought home the trophy, all my dad said was, couldn't you have put this much effort into your calculus grade? Or meanwhile, when Billy got a participation certificate for some business club conference, they took him out to celebrate and put the certificate in a frame on the mantle. But I was always good with my hands, liked fixing things, figuring out how stuff worked. After high school, I went to a technical college instead of the fancy university they wanted. Became an HVAC technician. Dad actually told me at my graduation dinner that he was disappointed but not surprised. Real supportive, right? Meanwhile, Billy went to their dream school, joined the right fraternity, studied business like Dad wanted. Every family dinner turned into the Billy show. His grades, his internships, his girlfriend from a good family. I'd sit there pushing food around my plate while they'd gush over how he got some summer associate position at his buddy's dad's firm or whatever. When I started my own small HVAC repair business at 23, they barely acknowledged it. That's nice, honey, was all Mom said, before immediately asking Billy about his internship. The one time I tried to talk about landing a big contract with 3 apartment complexes, Dad just nodded, took a bite of his steak, and changed the subject to Billy's new car. And for 3 years, I worked my ass off building that business. 60 to 70-hour weeks, no vacations, barely any social life. My girlfriend Jamie stuck with me through most of it. She was studying to be a nurse and understood the hustle. We had this small apartment together. I'd come home late, covered in grease and sweat, and she'd already have food ready. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like we were building something together. There was this one night, about a year into running my business, when I got a call at 2 a.m. from this luxury condo building downtown. Their HVAC system had completely died during a heat wave, and the big companies were all booked solid. I dragged myself out of bed, spent 8 hours in a cramped maintenance room, sweating bullets to fix their system. The property manager was so impressed he signed a maintenance contract on the spot, tripled my monthly income overnight. When I called my parents to share the news, Dad answered, listened for maybe 30 seconds, then said he had to go because Billy just got an interview with Goldman Sachs. They didn't even ask how much the contract was worth. When I was even saving up to propose to Jamie, had my eye on this ring that wasn't anything crazy, but it was nice. Had it picked out and everything. Started putting away a little cash each month in this fireproof safe I kept hidden in our closet. Old school, I know, but after watching my dad lose a bunch in the market crash, I didn't fully trust banks. Then last year, everything went to shit. Lost 2 major contracts when a bigger company with more resources undercut my prices. Couldn't make payroll for my 2 employees. Good guys who'd been with me from almost the beginning. Had to sell all my equipment just to pay them their final checks. Watching my logo get painted over on the work van was like a freaking funeral. One of the worst days was when I had to let go of Mike, my main technician. Guy had 3 kids, wife with medical issues, and had turned down a more stable job to stick with my company because he believed in what we were building. Having to tell him I couldn't make payroll anymore. Man, I still have nightmares about the look on his face. He didn't even get mad, just nodded and said he understood. That almost made it worse. In 2 weeks after I shut down the business, Jamie dumped me. I can't handle your negativity, and I need someone more stable, were her exact words. Found out later she was already seeing some doctor from her hospital. Guess nurses and doctors is a cliche for a reason. The guy was like 40 with a fancy car and a house in the suburbs. Can't really compete with that when you're sleeping on your friend's couch. So there I was, 27 years old, business gone, girlfriend gone, apartment I couldn't afford anymore. All I had left was about $16,500 in cash savings I'd been squirreling away in that small fireproof safe. Not exactly life-changing money, but enough to keep me from being completely screwed while I figured out my next move. I called my parents, swallowed what was left of my pride, and asked if I could crash at their place for a couple months until I got back on my feet. The silence on the phone before they answered told me everything I needed to know about how welcome I was. They agreed, but man, the way my dad said, "I suppose we can make room," made it clear I was a burden, not a son needing help. Moving back into my childhood bedroom was weird AF. They'd mostly converted it into a home office, with my dad's fancy ergonomic chair and these framed certificates from accounting seminars all over the walls. I was sleeping on a pull-out couch surrounded by file cabinets and staring at my dad's golf trophies. Nothing says you're a temporary guest in your own family, quite like that setup. I found out later they'd converted my room literally the weekend after I moved out for college. Billy's room, still perfectly preserved with his high school trophies and posters, even though he hadn't lived there in years. From day one, the rules were clear. I needed to contribute and not be a freeloader. So I basically became their unpaid handyman. Fixed the dishwasher that had been making weird noises for years. Replaced the bathroom fan. Rewired the garage door opener that they'd gotten 3 quotes to fix. All too expensive. I mowed the lawn, painted the deck, cleaned the gutters, basically saved them thousands in contractor fees. My dad would literally leave little lists of tasks on the kitchen counter for me. No good morning or how'd you sleep? Just a yellow legal pad with jobs for today written at the top. Meanwhile, I was sending out resumes, going to interviews, trying to rebuild some kind of life. The kicker was when their neighbor slipped me a $50 bill after I fixed her sprinkler system. My mom saw and made me give it back, saying it was inappropriate and I should help the neighbors as a courtesy. Later that same day, I overheard her on the phone bragging to her friend about how her son was so handy around the house and how much money they were saving on home repairs. Like I was some kind of free labor they'd cleverly acquired. Billy would swing by for Sunday dinners in his shiny Audi, graduation gift from the parents, of course, and act like I was the family charity case. He had this condescending way of asking, "How's the job search going?" Humper it while checking his expensive watch or scrolling through his phone. He was working at some investment firm downtown, constantly humble bragging about his clients and accounts and quarterly bonuses. My parents ate it up like it was candy. Billy's being considered for a promotion already. Billy just put a down payment on a condo. Billy's dating the daughter of the firm's partner. Meanwhile, I'd mentioned an interview I had for a maintenance supervisor position at a local factory, and they'd barely nod before asking if I'd fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom yet. There was this one Sunday dinner that really sticks in my mind. Mom had made Billy's favorite meal, despite knowing I'm allergic to shellfish. When I pointed this out, she acted all surprised and said, "Oh, I forgot. There's leftover meatloaf in the fridge you can heat up." Like I was the family dog getting scraps. Billy actually laughed. Right then, I should have known something bad was coming. The whole time, my safe with my savings stayed hidden in my closet behind some old winter coats. I never mentioned it to anyone. That money was my only safety net, my only shot at getting out of there with some dignity. Was planning to use it for first and last month's rent on a new place once I locked down a steady job. About 7 weeks after I moved back, we had this big family reunion at my parents' place. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the works. My dad grilled overpriced steaks. My mom made a big show of her famous potato salad, literally just store-bought with extra mayo. And Billy arrived 2 hours late with his new girlfriend Mackenzie, who looked like she'd walked out of a country club catalog. Designer sunglasses, tennis bracelet, the whole 9 yards. My cousin Danny was the only one who actually treated me like a normal human being. He's a mechanic at this high-end garage, so I guess we're both the blue-collar disappointments of the family. We were catching up in the corner of the yard, talking about maybe going in together on a side business, doing custom car modifications, when I noticed Billy giving me these weird looks all afternoon. At one point, I went inside to grab more napkins and caught him coming out of my room. He claimed he was just looking for the bathroom, which was bull since he grew up in this house and knows exactly where everything is. When he hugged me goodbye at the end of the day, it was this awkward, too long embrace that felt off, like he was trying to distract me from something. That night after everyone left, I went up to my room and just had this gut feeling something was wrong. Call it intuition or whatever, but something felt off. I checked my safe, hidden behind the winter coats in the closet. It looked completely untouched from the outside. The keypad was fine, no scratches around the dial. I put in my code, turned the handle, and empty. Completely freaking empty. I literally sat down on the floor staring at it. Then, like an idiot, I closed it and opened it again, thinking maybe I was just tired and seeing things. But nope, my $16,500 was gone. Every single dollar I'd saved, everything I had left in the world. The feeling that hit me was like nothing I'd ever experienced. I tore through the whole room looking for the money, thinking maybe I'd moved it and forgotten. I hadn't. I checked under the mattress, behind the drawers, inside my shoes, anywhere someone might hide cash in a hurry. I was tearing the room apart when my dad appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with this smug look on his face. He wasn't even trying to hide it. The family had a discussion, he said, all calm and collected like we were talking about the weather. We decided it's time you actually contributed something meaningful. Then he dropped the bomb. They'd taken my money to pay for Billy's MBA application fees and first semester deposit. Said it was an investment in the family's future, since Billy would actually make something of himself. I lost it. Told him it was theft, plain and simple. Said I'd call the cops. He actually laughed and said, "Who do you think they'll believe? And the respected accountant or the failed handyman living in his parents' house?" That's when I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Then I guess you won't mind what happens next." He just smirked and walked away, like I was some kid making empty threats. Little did he know how serious I was. I couldn't sleep that night, just laid there staring at the ceiling, this hollow feeling in my chest where my last bit of hope used to be. My own parents, the people who were supposed to love and protect me, had stolen from me when I was at my lowest. And they weren't even sorry about it. They thought they were right. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat there in the dark, planning my next move. By 5 a.m., I had packed everything I cared about. Some clothes, my laptop, tools, and most importantly, this old document folder my grandfather had given me years ago that my parents didn't know about. I left before anyone woke up. Didn't even leave a note. Just got in my beat-up Toyota with the check engine light that had been on for months and drove. The gas gauge was hovering just above empty, so I stopped at an ATM to get cash for fuel, only to discover my bank account was overdrawn by $37. They'd thought of everything, probably figured I'd try to leave and made sure I couldn't get far. Luckily, I had about $43 in loose cash in my glove compartment, emergency fund of spare change, and crumpled bills. Enough to get me on the road at least. By noon, my phone was blowing up. Missed calls from Mom, Dad, Billy, text messages, voicemails ranging from angry, "How dare you leave like this?" to fake concern, "We're worried about you," to actual threats, "You better not do anything stupid or you'll regret it." The most ridiculous message was from my mom. "We've always supported you and this is how you repay us? By running away in the middle of the night? What will the neighbors think?" Like that was the biggest problem here. What the neighbors would think about their son leaving, not that they'd stolen his life savings. I ignored all of them and kept driving north to my Uncle Pete's place in Maine. He's my mom's older brother, but they haven't spoken in like 8 years. Some big blowout at a Christmas party that no one talks about. He used to be some hotshot in construction management until he got sick of the corporate BS and bought this big piece of land in the middle of nowhere. I stopped at a gas station with free Wi-Fi and messaged him on Facebook, the only contact info I had. Waited an hour in the parking lot until he wrote back, "Come on up." Then I called him from the station phone. "Let me guess," he said when he picked up. "They finally showed their true colors?" "For Tubao, they stole my money," I replied. "All of it." There was a pause then. "Get up here. We'll fix this." Uncle Pete's place wasn't what most people think of when they hear cabin in Maine. It was this massive hand-built house on 20 acres, with a workshop bigger than my parents' entire first floor, all timber frame construction with huge windows overlooking a lake. He'd built most of it himself after telling his former business partners they could screw themselves when they tried to push him out of the company he helped found. When I pulled up after almost 9 hours of driving, he was standing on the porch with his arms crossed, wearing a flannel shirt with the sleeves cut off despite the cold, looking like some mountain man from a movie. We sat on his porch that night, and I told him everything. How they'd always favored Billy. How they'd dismissed my business from day one. How they'd stolen my savings and acted like I should be grateful. How they'd drained my bank account too, just to make sure I couldn't escape easily. Pete didn't say much while I talked, just nodded and occasionally cursed under his breath. His dog, this massive German shepherd named Timber, sat with his head on my knee the whole time, like he could sense I needed the support. When I finished, Pete asked, "You still got those trust documents Grandpa gave you?" I did. When my grandfather died 5 years ago, he'd left both Billy and me small trusts, about $35,000 each. Not exactly life-changing, but meaningful. Mine had this weird clause about protection from familial financial interference that I never understood until now. Grandpa was always the smart one. Must have seen through my parents' BS years ago. Pete disappeared into the house and came back with a folder full of old papers. He dropped it on the table between us. "Your dad borrowed $17,000 from me in 2016, he said. Never paid it back. Kept saying after the next bonus or after the tax return. Funny how it's almost the exact amount he took from you, isn't it?" My uncle had receipts. Literal receipts. And a signed promissory note from my dad with specific repayment terms that had obviously been ignored. "I've been waiting for the right time to cash this in," Pete said, tapping the folder. "I think we just found it." The next morning, I met Pete's neighbor, Sophia. She's in her 30s, this badass woman who rides a motorcycle and works remotely as a paralegal for some law firm in Boston. When Pete told her what happened, she immediately offered to help. "I've seen this kind of family financial abuse before," she said, typing furiously on her laptop. "You've got more options than you think." She showed me cases where similar situations had played out, helped me understand the legal angles, made it clear that what my parents did wasn't just morally wrong, but actually illegal on multiple levels. That afternoon, I got another surprise visitor. Olivia, my high school friend who'd gone on to become a forensic accountant. She and Pete had apparently stayed in touch over the years, and when he called her about my situation, she drove up from Boston immediately. "Your timing is actually perfect," she said, after hearing my story. "I've been building a case file on your dad for the last year through work. Nothing I could officially act on yet, but there's a pattern of, let's call them, financial irregularities." Turns out Olivia worked for a firm that specialized in tracking down hidden assets in divorce cases and financial fraud investigations. And my dad's name had come up multiple times in connection with clients who mysteriously had money disappear, right before major financial disclosures. "This isn't just about your savings," she explained, pulling out her laptop and showing me spreadsheets that might as well have been in a foreign language. "Your dad's been playing a very dangerous game for years. What he did to you was just stupid enough to finally give us a way in." Even for the first time since finding that empty safe, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely screwed. In fact, I might actually have the upper hand. Over the next few days, we built a strategy. Sophia knew exactly which legal buttons to push. Pete had dirt on my dad going back decades from family gatherings and business dealings. Olivia had actual financial records that showed patterns of suspicious activity. And I had something they didn't know existed: a complete record of all the work I'd done on their house, with dates, materials, and what it would have cost them to hire professionals. I'd kept the log as a way to show potential employers my skills, but now it was something much more valuable: proof of unpaid labor. "This is gold," Olivia said, going through my records. "You've documented approximately $7,300 worth of skilled labor they should have paid for. Combined with the stolen savings, we're looking at a significant civil claim, even before we get into the potential criminal aspects." I made 3 calls. One to my grandfather's old lawyer who handled the trust. 2, one to Sophia's friend at the IRS who loved family fraud cases. 3, one to my cousin Danny, who I knew I could trust. The legal wheels started turning. Documents were filed. Official letters were sent. My parents received the first notice by certified mail 3 days after I left: a demand for repayment of the misappropriated funds, plus interest, along with a formal notice that the trust was being reviewed for evidence of unauthorized access. 10 minutes after delivery, Billy called me. "What the FK did you do?" he hissed into the phone. I hung up without answering and blocked his number. That weekend, Pete and I were clearing out his basement when we found boxes of old home videos. Most weren't labeled, but one caught my eye: Frank's 40th Lake House. And we watched it that night on Pete's ancient TV. Most of it was boring family stuff, awkward dancing, bad jokes. But about halfway through the footage of the party, there was my dad, visibly intoxicated by the fire pit, bragging to my uncles about financial tricks he used. "The key is to always have money moving," he slurred on the video. "The IRS can't track what they can't see still. I've got accounts they don't even know about." Then he laughed and added, "Hell, I could take money from my own kids' accounts and they'd never know the difference." Pete and I looked at each other. "When was this?" I asked. 7 years ago, Pete said. "Your dad has always been exactly who he is." I made a digital copy of that clip and several others. Then I sent the file to Sophia and Olivia, who forwarded it to their lawyer friend who was helping us navigate the legal stuff. And Olivia was particularly excited about the video. This corroborates exactly what we suspected. It's one thing to have suspicious patterns in financial records. It's another thing entirely to have video admission of intent to commit financial fraud. 2 days later, my mom called, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "What have you done?" she cried. "They're saying we could lose the house. Your father is beside himself. How could you do this to your family?" Notice. She didn't apologize for stealing my money. Didn't even mention it. It was all about them. Their house, their reputation, their feelings. Classic narcissist playbook. I let her finish, then simply said, "You should have thought about that before you stole from me," and hung up. Pete was sitting across from me at the kitchen table. He didn't say anything for a while, just sipped his coffee. Then he looked up with this gleam in his eye. Ready to make them really sweat? A week later, my parents reached out through their lawyer, said they wanted to meet to resolve this situation as a family. They suggested dinner at this overpriced Italian place my dad loves to show off at. The kind of restaurant where the waiter lists off specials that don't have prices, and my dad always orders the most expensive thing to prove he can. Pete and Sophia thought it was a trap, that they'd try to manipulate me emotionally, or worse, try to get me to say something they could use against me legally. But I saw an opportunity. "Let them think they're setting me up," I said. "Meanwhile, I'll get everything out of their mouths and record the whole thing." Both Pete and Sophia liked the plan. Olivia said she'll come too, sit at the bar to watch. They hadn't seen her since high school, so she'd blend right in. The night of the dinner, I arrived 20 minutes early and got a table in the back corner with good acoustics. I had my phone set to record in my jacket pocket, plus a backup recorder in my wallet that Sophia had given me. Maine is a one-party consent state for recording, so what I was doing was completely legal. They showed up right on time, all of them dressed like this was a business meeting, not a family dinner. Mom had this fake smile on her face. Dad looked annoyed, like this was all a big inconvenience. Billy looked nervous, kept fidgeting with his watch. Dad extended his hand like we were closing a deal. I ignored it. "Let's just sit down," I said. The whole dinner was this weird performance. They took turns telling me how concerned they were about my mental state. Dad tried to explain that taking my money was actually for my own good, because I clearly couldn't manage it responsibly. He cited the failed business as proof. Mom kept dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, talking about how the family name was being dragged through the mud and how their friends at the country club were starting to ask questions. Olivia was there, keeping tabs from the bar. She didn't miss a word. Billy was the worst. He actually said, "Bro, I'm sorry you're upset, but it was a family decision. We all agreed your money would be better used for my MBA. I'll pay you back someday when I'm making the big bucks. You should be happy. I'm going to turn it into way more than $16,500. I just kept asking questions, playing dumb. So you all voted to take my money without asking me? And Dad, you knew the combination to my safe how exactly? Mom, were you aware that taking someone's money without permission is legally theft? By dessert, they thought they were winning me over. Dad ordered an expensive drink to celebrate family coming together. That's when they slipped up. The funny thing is, Dad said after finishing his glass, we didn't even need your money for Billy's deposit. We could have covered it ourselves. Mom giggled. But why would we use our vacation fund when you had cash just sitting there doing nothing? Billy chimed in. Besides, it's not like you were using it for anything important. You were just hiding it while living rent-free in our house. Dad raised his glass. To family priorities, he said, clearly thinking he'd won. I pretended to check my phone, confirmed I'd gotten everything recorded clearly, then looked up at them. Thank you for making this so easy, I said quietly. What do you mean? Mom asked, her smile faltering. I mean, I just needed you to admit what you did and why you did it. And you just did. The color drained from Dad's face. Billy started spluttering something about family privacy. Mom just stared. I stood up. Enjoy your dinner. The bill's on you, obviously. Walking out of that restaurant was one of the best moments of my life. Could practically feel them staring at my back as I pushed through the door. Olivia followed a few minutes later, practically bouncing with excitement. That was freaking perfect, she said. Your dad just confessed to theft with witnesses present. The next morning, I sent the recording to our lawyer. By noon, they had filed amended complaints adding admissions of premeditated theft, conspiracy, and financial abuse. But that was just the beginning. Uncle Pete had been busy too. Remember that promissory note my dad signed for the $17,000 loan? Pete had filed it with the county clerk, along with a lien against my parents' house. They'd been trying to refinance to pay for fancy renovations. granite countertops, and some ridiculous outdoor kitchen setup. Now they couldn't. The bank froze the application instantly when the lien appeared. Olivia went into full forensic accountant mode, working with Sophia's IRS friend. She was particularly interested in something my dad mentioned on the recording, about moving money between accounts to hide it. Your father has at least 3 shell companies, she told me after 2 days of digging, and he's been using them to hide income for years. From what I can see, he's underreported at least $150,000 in income over the past 5 tax cycles. Turns out the IRS doesn't take kindly to people bragging about hiding money from them. They opened a formal investigation, starting with an audit of the last 7 years of tax returns. Then came the trust hammer. My grandfather's trust had specific conditions. If any family member tried to unduly influence or coerce financial decisions related to the beneficiaries, control of both trusts would revert to the executor, who happened to be my grandfather's oldest friend, a retired judge named Harold. When Harold heard the recording and saw the evidence, he was furious. Not only did he freeze Billy's trust completely, he triggered the penalty clause, which meant my parents were now required to account for every penny they'd managed from either trust over the past 5 years. That's when we discovered they'd been skimming from Billy's trust too, borrowing money for years, while telling him it was just growing slowly because of market conditions. They'd taken over $20,000 from his trust fund for their own expenses, things like their fancy anniversary trip to Italy and Dad's ridiculous midlife crisis car. 3 days after the dinner, I drove by my parents' house out of curiosity. There was a black sedan in the driveway with government plates. My dad was standing in the front yard, red-faced, gesturing wildly, while a woman in a suit took notes. Mom was visible through the window, sitting at the kitchen table with her head in her hands. Guess the IRS doesn't waste time when they smell blood in the water. Wait, what I didn't expect to see was the neighbors gathered across the street, not even trying to hide the fact that they were watching the whole thing. Later, Danny told me the story had spread through the entire neighborhood. Everyone knew my parents had stolen from their own son, and now they were facing federal investigators. For people who cared so much about appearances, this had to be their worst nightmare. My mom called me that night, not crying this time, screaming. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she shrieked. "Your father might lose his license. The firm is putting him on leave. We can't access any of our accounts. Even our credit cards are frozen. They're saying something about identity fraud. All the neighbors saw the government agents. The neighbor wouldn't even look at me at the mailbox." I waited until she ran out of breath. "Sounds like consequences," I said, and hung up. Meanwhile, Olivia had been digging deeper into my parents' financial history and found something interesting. A quiet little account in my name that I never knew existed. Apparently, when I was 18, my dad had opened it using my social security number, claiming it was a custodial account for educational expenses. He'd been filtering money through it for years, using it as a tax shelter. Classic identity fraud, Olivia explained. He opened the account when you turned 18, so technically you were an adult and the bank wouldn't require your presence if he had all your documentation, which, as your parent, he would have had access to. That discovery led to 3 more accounts, all using variations of my or Billy's information. Classic identity fraud, the kind that carries actual jail time. I sent an anonymous tip to my dad's firm about potential financial improprieties involving client funds. Given the ongoing IRS investigation, they couldn't afford to ignore it. They launched an internal audit the same day, put my dad on administrative leave pending the results. Then I called my cousin Danny, who works at the garage where my dad gets his precious BMW serviced. Turns out Dad had been running a little side scam for years, claiming business expense deductions for personal vehicle maintenance. Danny had copies of service records where my dad specifically asked them to change the description on the invoices from detailing to client meeting transportation preparation. Those went straight to the IRS too. By the end of the week, my dad was fully suspended from his firm. My mom's real estate broker had temporarily deactivated her license pending the investigation. Billy's MBA acceptance was under review due to financial irregularities in his application. That's when I got a text from Billy. "You've destroyed everything. Happy now?" I replied with just one word. Yes. A month into the legal proceedings, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Mackenzie, Billy's girlfriend. "Your brother is a mess," she said. "He can't sleep, barely eats. Your parents call him crying multiple times a day. They're saying they might lose the house." "And?" I asked. "And he wanted me to ask if there's anything they can do to make this stop. They're desperate." I thought about it for a minute. "Tell them I want my $16,500 back, plus $10,000 for the work I did on their house." and I want it by the end of the week. Oh, and one more thing. I want them to admit what they did, in writing, and sign it. 2 days later, Billy showed up at Uncle Pete's place looking like he'd aged 5 years in a month, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same sweatshirt I'd seen him in at the dinner. They sent me to negotiate, he said, his voice flat. Pete invited him in. We sat at the kitchen table while Sophia and Olivia watched from the corner. Billy started with, Mom and Dad can get you $12,000 right now. It's all they can access with the accounts frozen. They'll pay the rest in installments. Not good enough, I said. Please, they're falling apart. Dad might face criminal charges. Mom cries all day. The neighbors are talking. They could lose everything. Sounds like a you problem, Pete muttered. I leaned forward. Here's my final offer. The full amount, $26,500 by tomorrow, plus the signed confession. Or the investigations continue, and I press criminal charges for identity theft. We can't get that much by tomorrow, Billy protested. I stood up. Then I guess we're done here. Wait! Billy looked desperate. What about your car? Would you take their car as partial payment? The BMW. It's worth way more than what they owe you. I glanced at Pete, who shrugged. Title has to be clean, transferred to my name, delivered here with a cashier's check for the remainder. Billy nodded quickly. And then you'll stop everything? All the investigations, the legal stuff, all of it? Dupur, I'll stop what I can, I said. If I get what I asked for, I'll back off. After some back and forth, Billy finally agreed to my terms. The next day, my parents' BMW pulled up outside Pete's place. My dad handed me an envelope with the car title, a cashier's check for $9,500, and a typed confession signed by both him and my mom. Are you satisfied now? He asked bitterly. You've destroyed our family? I looked him straight in the eye. You did that when you decided your second son wasn't worth basic respect. They drove away in Pete's old truck, and I stood there holding the keys to the BMW. I sold it a week later and used part of the money to buy a decent used pickup truck. I found a job with a commercial HVAC company in Portland, where the pay was good and my skills were actually respected. My parents' lives imploded. Dad lost his job. Mom surrendered her real estate license, and they had to sell their house at a loss to cover legal fees. The IRS investigation revealed they'd been living far beyond their means for years, maintaining a facade of success through financial fraud. Billy's MBA acceptance was rescinded, and last I heard, he was working as an assistant manager at a cell phone store. I still think about my family sometimes, but not with anger anymore. Uncle Pete, Sophia, Danny, Olivia, they're my real family now. The people who helped me when I needed it, who saw my worth when my own parents couldn't. As my grandfather once told me, family isn't about blood. It's about who treats you like you matter. Sometimes the only way to win a rigged game is to flip the table and walk away.